Welcome everyone. It is now 1 p.m. Central Time. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today on a presentation on the 5 Pizza Hut metrics that matter. My name is Peyton Berger with Delaget, and I'll be your moderator of today's event. Before we get to the presentation, I just want to cover a couple quick housekeeping items. First, all of today's participants will be on mute for the duration of the presentation. So if at any time you do have a question, please type it in the Q&A box on the right side of your GoToWebinar panel. And then if there's time at the end of the presentation, we'll host a Q&A session and respond to any questions at that time. Also, today's presentation is being recorded and will be provided to you along with a copy of the slides and a follow-up email from me within the next couple of days, so just watch your email for that. At the end of the webinar, you will be presented with a short 4-question survey, and we'd really appreciate if you took a minute to let us know what you thought of today's presentation and if it was on par with what you expected, so we can continue to make these as valuable as possible. And taking us through today's content is Ed Heskett, Loss Prevention Manager here at Delaget. He has more than 30 years of experience in a variety of above-store leader roles in the restaurant industry. Throughout his career, Ed has developed, implemented, and used loss prevention tools to improve restaurant operations and profitability in a number of stores across 4 different brands. He has been working with Delaget as a loss prevention expert for over 15 years now, training and assisting restaurant operators with the implementation of loss prevention tactics and software. Thanks for joining us, Ed.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're getting started here looking at our first slide, the 5 pizza metrics that matter: food, labor, triples, and production and delivery. And we're speaking today of the operational metrics that matter to us on the Pizza Hut side of our business. Loss prevention components such as cancels, voids, counts will not be covered in today's presentation. So going through and getting started, we're going to be discussing why goal setting will improve metrics, why data tracking is the key part to every successful Pizza Hut business, and how following the right metrics can save you time and money. And as you look at these 3 different points, I'm also offering up for your consideration what we really already know about the pizza business in general. It's extremely competitive and extremely unpredictable. And planning today on giving you some tips on how to get a hold of, keep hold of the control of your business on these metrics that we've mentioned: the labor, triples, production, and delivery. So next we talk about two focal points as it relates to understanding data in our restaurants. And what we have in those terms of those focal points is time and data. And we use those together to understand what is happening in our restaurants and why. We use time to understand if we have patterns, either restaurant related or team member performance related, or it's an isolated incident. Perhaps we as operators or somebody on our team had a bad day. Or is it an isolated? Is it isolated by virtue of having a day, or do we have several bad days strung together, telling us that something larger may be happening in front to prevent us from succeeding? And then the data, and the data is really important with all the reports that are generated in your restaurants on a daily, weekly, and period basis to understand and accept that the data is correct and it's telling you what is happening in your restaurant. Doing so can really help you understand without the emotion that you may have to a particular employee on your team or a manager on your team to making decisions, whether it's coaching or discipline or whatever the case might be. So using these focal points, time and data, to understand restaurants' performance And team performance is critically important, and we're going to come back to this throughout the presentation this afternoon. So I'm putting this information together today, pardon me. I asked myself, what do the 5 metrics have in common? About labor costs, food costs, production, delivery, and triples. The common theme here, the common denominator, is sales forecasting and scheduling. And really that's the gist of time together today, to offer up some tips, some thoughts, and best practices around scheduling and forecasting, and positioning the metrics in such a way that you realize the importance of these 2 things, sales and forecasting, as it relates to success or the roadblocks that you have in your success in daily, weekly, and period actions. So both sales forecasting and scheduling impact ordering, prepping, and the one thing that there are 2 things that they have in common, making sure you, A, don't have too much, or B, not enough product. If you're dealing on the too much side, then you have additional inventory in your restaurant that is costing your organization money, or perhaps putting you in a position where you're going to be running up against expiration time of product into the dough that you use, especially given the wide variety of dough in the restaurants these days. Enough product, which puts you in a position of borrowing product and then returning product. And think about it, how disruptive that is, and the time and energy that it takes to do that is not the time and energy that is scheduled in your daily and weekly plan. So forecasting plays a vital role and then on to prepping, the same thing would apply. Too much or not enough. If you've got too much prep, you're going to run into expiration issues, food safety issues, maybe a situation where you're violating time and temperature as it relates to handling product, and in that case you've got food safety issue, and or waste. And we all know we have waste challenges in our restaurants, which has a negative impact on our cost of goods, our food costs. So tying forecasting to these areas will get a better handle on having just the amount of product on hand, having it available, and then having it available to produce. And those 3 things, ordering, prepping, and prepping, obviously have an impact on your effectiveness in in-store time and delivery time, 2 of our key components today. So looking a little deeper at sales forecasting. Are your numbers right? To understand how effective sales are forecasting, you need to have some sort of tracking system in place to compare to your goal. And that's where I wanted to be. Sorry for the technical difficulty there. So example of ineffective forecasting, this is a snapshot of a Pizza Hut location, 16 days worth of percentages from forecasted to actual sales. And the goal that I've used throughout my career business, and the brand really doesn't matter, it holds true for really everywhere, is 5%. So you see 6% there towards at the bottom, the 6.32, and then a 4.3 higher and a 1.36, and 0.32 higher still. We're doing a pretty good job on those days in terms of forecasting. And then you see some of those negative numbers up into the teens. That's an indication that we are either A, neglectful in our forecasting and not using the data that's available to us, or we're dealing with some of the ability that we have a tendency to see in the Pizza Hut business. And my gut tells me here that we're just not paying close enough attention to the forecasting piece. So to get a calculation to understand this, keeping in mind the 5% goal, and this is a plus or minus 5% goal. So you have your actual sales minus forecasted sales divided by your forecasted sales will give you your variance percent. And if you want to be real diligent about your forecasting, you could certainly delve into this at the day part level. But really, start with looking at a specific day, and then your order time period, and then a week, and then a period. And you will find the closer that your sales is to this plus or minus 5% number, the more successful you're going to be in building a schedule that needs of your business, your employees, and your guests. So moving on, from a scheduling standpoint, what's in your toolkit? Every operator needs the right tools to create the right schedule. And when we talk about history, we're obviously talking about last year's good to have, your sales average, your current sales trends, understanding marketing forecast, and marketing for coupons prevalent in your world. It's really important to not only understand what's going on in the Pizza Hut side of things, but what your competitors in your general area are doing when you see coupons. If you live in the area or if one of your team members do, to make sure that's communicated to you, understand what that might look like from a forecasting standpoint. Of course, weather has an impact on all restaurant organizations, and certainly the Pizza Hut side. And typically, pizza is busy when quick service restaurants aren't, and vice versa. Inclement weather may drive your business, depending upon where you're at. And understanding that and what the might be is really critically important when it comes to forecasting. And then, of course, communicating what's going on in your general area and how does that affect your business. So moving on to scheduling and hiring, operators should hire their overall people plan. You should have a people plan in place and something that is updated on a period basis and then as needed. And these 4 bullet points right below that, there's two things that I want to cover on the communicate piece. One is that your coverage needs, if they're not immediately available to you by virtue of the availability of your team, that those are communicated to your team to make sure that your needs are filled in your restaurant. And then the other component of the communicate piece is to make sure as your days and week go along each week that you're communicating with your subordinate management team on the effectiveness and the execution of your schedule, both in terms of the forecast and the people that you scheduled and deployed on your specific days and day parts. Make room. The key point here is to always be looking for talent and make room for talent. If you have a candidate that comes in, maybe you don't have room by virtue of numbers on your people plan or your schedule, but you like this candidate, you have to find a way to continue to add talent to your team within the framework of your schedule and the labor that you are allowed to spend to run your business. Now, set the bar, important component, and when I'm setting the bar here, I'm talking about creating an expectation to have high standards for attendance and punctuality for everyone on your team, and reward behavior. The employees that are always on time, perhaps they stay late, perhaps they come in when called earlier on their day off to help support you and your team. And on the other side of that is to discipline the poor behavior for people on your team that are taking the team down because they have attendance issues, not coming to work on time, asking to leave early, changing in schedule, those types of things that can really be disruptive to your schedule. And then time it. And this point is really a critical point when it comes to forecasting and scheduling, and that's make the time to write a good schedule, post it in a timely manner for your team, and then make the time to talk to your team about evaluating, as I said earlier, the overall execution of your schedule and your forecasting. I'll say this again at the end, but it's worth saying now under the time it piece. I've come across far too many restaurant operators in my career that write the schedule because it's a weekly activity that has to get done and they have to have something posted for their team. And it couldn't be further from the truth. And if that's your thought process, you're almost setting yourself up for failure right from the go. Writing the schedule is an opportunity for you to take each week to write a sound business plan for the next week. An accurate forecast is where it starts, and then the scheduling and the deployment of the team as needed can really set yourself up to win and address any holes that you have or any shortcomings that you may have in the 5 metrics that we're discussing. So a great schedule includes training of new hires, cross-training of existing staff, development of the management team, time for detailed cleaning, and there's other things on there as well. But these are really 4 of the big things that are all incorporated with running your business, which I mentioned here, all within the framework of running the business and caring for your customers. And you really have to do these 4 things while running your business, and you have to run your business while you're doing these 4 things. The 2 go hand in hand, and to the degree those things, you're going to be successful in meeting your metrics on a guest, hour by hour, day part by day part, and daily and weekly standpoint. So 5 metrics that are affected by scheduling and forecasting. We covered them at the top: labor, triples, food, delivery, and production. And through each of those, and along the way, we will be tying those back to the sales and forecasting that I've already mentioned several times in the call to this point. So labor, what do we know? Excuse me. It's the 2nd largest expense in most cases behind food costs on your P&L. It's steadily on the rise for a variety of different reasons. In today's economy, we have a supply and demand issue where we have a high demand for employees and not quite as much of a supply. That always drives up the wage rate, in addition to the minimum wage rate that is taking place as we speak. So that's always a concern. And there's a number of ways of monitoring or managing your labor. Not all inclusive here, but ways your labor on employee productivity, which is sales per man hour. I'm going to touch on hours in a moment. Transactions per labor hour, overtime, wage average, non-productive hours spent opening and closing the restaurant. Critically important to understand those numbers as you're building your schedule and the impact that they have on labor. Keeping in mind that you have people in the restaurants completing tasks that are important tasks to set yourself up success on the front end of the day, and then set yourself up for success by closing up the restaurant properly. But when those tasks are occurring, you're running 100% labor costs because you have no revenue to cover for the expense. So maximizing the execution and minimizing the labor hours there through enhanced productivity is critically important. What I don't have on here is labor percent, and obviously that is the ultimate report card of how we manage our labor from period to period. And unfortunately, typically you see that at the end of the week as a real number, and more so at the end of the period or at the end of the month, whatever your accounting period might be. So labor percent is ultimately what we're looking at, but it's these components that help you get to that labor percent. I want to talk a little bit about turnover as it relates to labor. It can be a real killer, not only in executing labor, but in all of your metrics. And I've learned over time, if you have access to, if you can get access to a turnover report, that will not only tell you what your turnover is, but what your retention rate is for your employees. And what I found is if you can get to the point where 90% of your staff is on your team for 90 days or longer, that type of tenure gives you the experience, the know-how, and the ability to execute the 5 metrics that we're talking about today. If you're falling short in any of those areas, you may find that 90% number is something that you're falling short of, and something that you can look at to address through programs and things to do a better job of hanging on to your team and improving that retention level. And the other area that turnover really costs, and we've all fallen victim to this, where we have a lack of productivity, perhaps we have too many inexperienced people working in the wrong positions, and that just raises havoc on not only controlling the labor, but both your delivery times in store and delivery, and certainly the triple times, which is near and dear to us from a keeping it on the low end within tolerance. And then back to the hours piece. As you're looking at your hours and celebrating your variance on a daily basis versus what was scheduled, you need to go back a little bit deeper and look at your metrics. If you've met all your metrics that day and your labor is looking great, then that's fantastic. If it's not, perhaps the right labor variance for the day, but you missed it for a day part. So you can go back and look at your metrics for each of those day parts and understand what those are, and then go back to your schedule and look at what your schedule and deployment were and understand where the gaps were, and then go back and make those corrections. So moving on here, we're talking about the 3 rights, and this isn't really anything new to anybody on this call, I don't think. It's pretty much a standard in our business and certainly across the Yum restaurants. Having the right amount of people, the right people, and in the right place. And this is simply an extension of the forecasting side of writing your schedule. If you've taken the time and you've gotten your forecast down within that 5% range more often than not, and you're doing these things with your schedule, you've set yourself up for success when it comes to executing the standards that we're talking about today. Failure to deliver the customer metrics is almost always related to a breakdown in this area for a day part, a day, a week, or God forbid, even longer. So moving on and looking at triples. What's the problem with triples? Not news to anybody on this call. No one wants cold pizza. Sending free pizzas with a driver. It's a no-win situation because when we get to the 3rd customer, we're going to have an unhappy customer. And oftentimes when we have unhappy customers, we then have an unhappy driver, which may or may not set the tone for the rest of their shift. And we're certainly hoping it's the may not part. But we want to make sure that we're setting our drivers who we're putting in front of the guest out there in our community in a good place by not sending them out with 3 pizzas or 3 families worth of pizzas, if you will. And the self-report customer satisfaction, which has lasting impacts on your brand image, your restaurant reputation, poor return rate, and word of mouth, all detrimental to building and maintaining your sales. So how do you monitor this? You've got reports at the restaurants. There are web-based solutions to help you understand this. As your store has high percentage of triples, back to the staffing thing again, back to your schedule, to the deployment of the 3 rights, your forecasting, all those things will help you understand where your success was and where your breakdown may have been if you have issues executing the triples. And then the thing that you need to understand is that isolated or recurring issues that you're having. Who are your top performers? Who are your worst performers? How do you know? And how are you addressing those situations? Do you have that can help you identify who your top performers and your bottom performers are when it comes? And there are web-based solutions that can help you with that as well. Well, food costs, real quickly here. What do we know about food costs? Probably the most complicated metric that we have in our business to manage. It's the largest expense on the P&L. Ordering is critically important. Borrowing product costs you time and money. As I mentioned earlier, it's something that you do not plan for, and it's very disruptive in your business day. Oftentimes we find out we're running out of product at the wrong time before rush, and somebody has to leave the restaurant to go pick it up, and then you're always faced with the challenge of getting it back to the restaurant that you borrowed it from. Waste generated through mistakes, either in the order taking process, in the production on the line, or as mentioned earlier, over ordering, all those factors which have a significant impact on your food costs, and you need to understand that and levels that you have and ways to improve so you can control and reduce your food costs. So when you're looking at your food costs, why are your costs high? Again, sales forecasting, I keep riding that horse. It's an important one to ride and get right. It's the key to your success. Bouncing, I see a lot of this in a lot of restaurants, and I see a lot of it in Pizza Huts. And I know that the physical plants can be challenging from a storage standpoint, which then extends into proper inventory. It's really important that you and your supervisor set and understand what your daily variance should be for food, and then weekly, and then you stay within a framework of that every single day that you're taking inventory. When you see variances that are plus or minus 5% one day, and then you're up to into the teens, and then way down closer to 0, and then back up into the teens the next day, it's an indication that you have an inventory counting issue, which is something that needs to be addressed. You need to know as an operator that you're working on the right things every day to control your food costs, and you can't know that if your inventory is bouncing and you don't know that your variances are real. We talked about waste, certainly training, both at the ordering level, talking about ordering the product, at the inventory level, at the ordering via the telephone or over the counter and dealing with your guests, the accountability piece for people executing the knowledge that they demonstrated that they do have, all come into play in controlling your food costs. And then, of course, theft, which is a key component, but one that we're not covering on today's webinar. So where do you see this in your daily reporting? How can I communicate this issue with your team? You've got the store-level reports to help you with this. Do you take the time to look at the information and share it with your team is the question, and in what framework are you challenging them based on the information that you're giving them? So food cost goals, first and foremost, it comes down to setting thresholds, making sure you're understanding your forecasting, you're getting that right, you're ordering the product properly, and that you're leveling out the bounces in your daily variances, as I just mentioned. That's so critically important to control, and then coach the team. Delivery, how long is too long? Delaget research suggested it's 35 minutes. That's a number that that guests like. I know in my household, Pizza Hut is always our first choice for pizza, and typically they do a great job with 35-minute delivery. When they tell us it's going to be closer to an hour or longer, we choose a different pizza company. And I would bet that your customers, as loyal they are to you, they're loyal to themselves in time, and we're all busy folks. And we need to make sure that to protect our business and the loyalty of our customers, we're delivering 35 minutes in our Pizza Hut restaurants. Production, how long is too long? More than 15 minutes. Then it, by extension, will lend us to having problems on the delivery side. So 15 minutes to aid in speedy delivery up. Production from creation to boxing should take under 15 minutes, and you should have methods to measure your success there and understand what the gaps are when you see them in your either day part or your daily metrics. So how do you meet your delivery and your production goals? By monitoring the time averages, by making sure you're communicating them, the areas of concern that you have, and once again, go back to your schedule and understand the role that your forecasting and your deployment played in your ability to deliver these numbers, or the shortcomings that you had in delivering these numbers. So at the end of it all, when scheduling and forecasting are on target, this is a dashboard from a website solution that shows a day's worth of information, and with the exception of the food cost at minus 6.14%, this restaurant had a pretty good day. Likely to recommend 100%, triples 2.63. Obviously, you like that number to be 0, but 2.63 is a livable number. Hours, providing they were executed properly throughout the course of the day, great place to be, minus 1 hour for the day. On-time production is in the safe zone there. There's certainly room for improvement, but 59% is in the safe zone. And a really important number on this slide is on-time delivery at 100%. And this is what it looks like. And this is a snapshot of a restaurant that had a sales forecasting variance of 2.8%. I cannot stress that enough. So recapping the information from today before I turn it back over to Peyton for some questions. Sales forecasting, I think as I said, I've ridden that horse pretty hard and pretty long here in the 30 minutes in our time together. Stay within 5% of the variance. It's the key to your success. Schedule. Look at your weekly schedule as a business plan, not a weekly activity. Labor. Connect the metrics like triples, performance, and inflated delivery times to your executed schedule, and make sure that you're including your team in the feedback on the schedule as it relates to the forecasted piece and the scheduling of the 3 rights. Food costs, track, trend your daily variances, get control of your bounces, and coach your team accordingly across all of the components of food, and most certainly getting control of your bounces. You find yourself much more successful in that cost. And then delivery and production, set time goals for each metric, and turn to the schedule when goals aren't met. And think about our forecasting and schedule as a way to reach your end goal, which is great performance metrics. And with that, I'm turning it back over to Peyton.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. Before we end the presentation here, we have one quick polling question. So you can answer that in the right-hand side of your GoToMeeting panel. And the question is, are you interested in having a conversation with Delaget about how you can leverage data analytics like the stuff we covered today in your restaurant? A, yes, or B, no. That poll is now open. I'll leave that open for a couple minutes. Unfortunately, we are at the end of time, so we did not have a chance to get to questions. But if you do have any extra questions after the presentation, definitely feel free to reach out to either me or Ed, and we will address your question. Thank you again, Ed, for the valuable information. And just another reminder to everybody that today's event has been recorded, and it will be available to you along with a copy of the slides within a couple days. For more information on Delaget solutions that can help you enhance your data analytics and those 5 metrics in your restaurant, please visit us at delaget.com. And that concludes our webinar for today. Again, we'd greatly appreciate it if you take a moment to fill out the short survey when you close out the webinar, and that will appear shortly. Thank you all, and have a great afternoon.